All right, welcome back to Judge Doug's Chambers. We're still working on a title for this, but a lot of news with Dan Snyder. We have on again attorney Dan Lust, who was with us last time to discuss everything that's happening with the Daniel Snyder saga and the Washington football team Commanders. And we have some breaking news. Pretty much, Dan Snyder might be going to jail.
I don't know if he's quite going to jail, but let's just say things have all of a sudden would seem to cool down for Snyder. I think they're heating back up. So, yeah, I mean, Doug's, I warned you a little bit ahead of time. I said there were a couple investigations that were pending at the state attorney general level, but now news, just as Dan Snyder, says he might be selling the team or maybe a minority share. The feds, ESPN has this report that the federal government, now the attorney general's office, is investigating Dan Snyder for what they call financial impropriety. So certainly happy to break that down with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm telling you, I was in the office yesterday when PFT came in, and the news that just broke when he was on his way in, that Daniel Snyder is considering looking into possibly selling the team. They've brought on Bank of America to look into, hey, what are my options? And so that seemed to be pretty much the announcement. Hey, we're looking into it. It wasn't Daniel Snyder is selling the team. It was we're looking into it.
Yeah, I mean, let's start there. Let's pretend we didn't know about the feds at this point. If you just knew that, which for like 2-3 hours is all we really knew, you'd have to wonder, okay, this is a very big step here. Dan Snyder has, just like back in the day when the team was the Redskins, and Dan Snyder said, we will never change the name. Like, you can print that. And then they changed the name. So Snyder even putting out a news release that he's considering selling the team or some portion of it is big news. And then, we'll go down that rabbit hole for a second. Like, why would that happen? We talked about it, Doug's, at length the last time I was on with you. But if the NFL does have the votes to kick him out, and if you listen to comments from Jim Irsay and, just read around the vibe of the owners' meetings, it seems like Snyder's losing the room. So if Snyder feels that he's going to get kicked out, right, that would divest him of 100% of the team. So why would Dan Snyder consider selling, on his own terms, or even a minority percentage, or maybe like 60-70% of the team? Because he could, in theory, stay on, right? Let's say he sold 80% of the team to Bezos, and Bezos, put in some, gigantic number, and Snyder can retain 20%. So maybe the NFL is okay with that. Maybe the NFL is okay if Dan Snyder is not the controlling owner of the team. But if Snyder lets the NFL protocol run out under, it's 8.13 of the NFL's bylaws, he could get voted out, and it can be done very publicly. What we call, I think last time I explained to you, was like a mini trial with Snyder trying to give in evidence and owners kind of fighting back. So if Snyder offers up this peace offering, like, hey, I'm going to actually move to the background, it's not going to be me or my wife running the team, somebody else will take it over, maybe the NFL is okay with that. So, that is one reason why he would sell the team. But, as we're sitting here today, I think probably the reason is because of this, this federal investigation that's now popping up, which I think will have an impact on the valuation of the team. So maybe he was trying to get out of it, and he obviously lost that race.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it goes back, and we talked about, he's a billionaire NFL owner. You want that control. And so that might have been his way of still staying in control, saying, hey, I'm leaving on my own terms, but I'm not fully leaving. I can still have it in the back of my head. I can still tell myself I'm an NFL owner, and the NFL might have gone for that. But again, we talked about it last time, where it's a matter of, it's not just Dan Snyder being the owner. It's what does that come with, and that might have implications down the road. It has already, as far as the Washington football team getting a new stadium, and so that might be a whole nother issue, where even if they were okay with what he's done in the past, even if it's the financial improprieties of possibly stealing money from other owners, even if they were okay with him staying on as minority owner, it still may have complications. Just because the NFL is okay with it, that doesn't mean DC or Maryland or Virginia, whoever's going to be building this new stadium when it comes around, wants to still deal with a team that Dan Snyder is involved with.
Yeah, so here's where, I think last time we spent a lot of time talking about how he was taking money from other owners. That's certainly one element of the testimony that was presented to Congress. But, for the Fed's purposes and the state attorney general, there's also allegations that money was being taken from consumers. So this is where I think your guy PFT might have some anger, right? There are allegations that, as a team, there's testimony from someone in the ticketing office in the sales department that money was being retained in a way, how do we phrase this? Like, there were deposits being put down for season tickets, and the Commanders are alleged to have made it very hard for consumers to get that money out. So it's in theory a consumer fraud, right? That's very different than stealing money from the owners. And the owner allegation, which I know we spoke about, but is a theory of cooking the books, that Washington was underreporting NFL revenue and pretending that they had higher, college football revenue from Navy games or from Kenny Chesney concerts. And that's dating back like a decade. So the fraud that's alleged here is, again, with respect to the owners, it's respect to the consumers, but for federal government purposes, and that's who's being alleged to be investigating this, it seems like we're talking about some tax fraud at a certain point. So depending on who you've harmed, that depends on what agencies are going to get here. So, I guess it's an important question, right? If Snyder agrees to sell the team, right? Let's just say he agrees to sell 100%, and the NFL wants him out, and they say, you know what, Dan, we're going to forgive you from underreporting revenue to us. Just sell the team, and it's not a big deal. And they sign some type of backdoor deal. Maybe that resolves like some of the alleged financial improprieties, but it doesn't unwind the consumer fraud part, because as fans, they're not getting money back in their pockets. Then there's certainly a world where Washington as an organization would have to disgorge certain benefits that they've obtained due to consumer fraud. So, Doug's, on like the larger scale of things where, all these things kind of come to a head, we're talking about a valuation of Washington. I think Forbes had it like 5.7 billion as of last valuation. But like when you buy a team, you don't just buy into the team's profits and all the good stuff. You buy into their debts and liabilities and everything that comes with it. So, that might be cause for concern for a guy like Bezos to buy in. Bezos is worth like $100 billion. But maybe he says to himself, you know what, like this franchise has so much stink to it, right? There's all these state investigations. There's a federal investigation. Now, the Congress has still yet to give their report. Maybe, it's going to scare certain owners away. So all of these things are connected in some way or another.
Yeah, it's not a matter of Dan Snyder leaves and they still go after Snyder. It was all done in his organization.
Yeah. I mean, and that's if someone's doing their due diligence, and I think Doug's to a point that you just raised, right? Like the reason that Dan Snyder, I think why he's on the outs amongst owners is he could not get a new stadium. So that's going to impact the attendance and the optics of the league. And I think a guy like Bezos or any billionaire doing their due diligence will understand that Snyder wasn't able to get public funding for a stadium because the constituents in the DMV, right, hate him. So they all wrote to their politicians and they said, do not put any public money into the Commanders organization. So let's say, and I'm reading the Twitter replies, I'm seeing Washington fans speak out, and they're still saying like, our work here is not done until Snyder sells 100% of the team. So if Snyder wants to remain like a 20% or 30% minority owner, maybe some, rich billionaire that's buying in is going to be like, you know what, Dan, like, I don't want you to own 30% of the team. I want to own 100%. And then we still have this crazy scenario of like, let's say Snyder wants to hold on to 30% or 20%. Then he still might get voted out and still might have to go through the process of being kicked out of the league as a minority owner. So, there's a world where we're just at the tip of the iceberg to Snyderism. I know a lot of people are happy and thought we were done with this, but until Snyder agrees to pony up 100% of the team, we're still kind of in the muck here.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's some dilemma from Commanders fans, Washington football fans that just want to see. I'm sure there's a big segment that just want to see him leave, and like, hey, just go away, and we'll handle everything else. But then if they hear, oh, hey, there's possible jail time now, everyone knows Dan Snyder's not going to jail, most likely. But it's still, there's that hope that people have now. The the prosecution or the what is this which office is this? Is the FTC or who is this with the federal?
We don't know which office it is. We know it's the Attorney General, United States Attorney General. So we're not really sure who they're working with. If it's the SEC or the FBI, really could be any entity. But we just have that there is an open investigation at this point.
Yeah, and so Dan Snyder haters, there is hope for them that Dan Snyder is going to have to go through a whole bunch of stuff here. It's not going to be an easy sell. And but no matter what happens to him, it's not going to make up for the 20, 25 years of hell that, he's put Commanders fans through. But I want to go over, how is this going to look? So we hear that, hey, this investigation was brought on from the letters that were sent out by Congress saying, hey, we need to look further into this. I mean, we don't know who's doing the investigation right now, but is it possible that, there's some blue jackets with some empty boxes walking into, the Washington football team headquarters right now?
I mean, if it happens right now, you and I will have to end the podcast and, or,
Yeah.
end the video feed and go for breaking news here. But
Yeah.
I think that's in the realm of possibility. Sure. I mean, Doug's like, before we miss this, and I know you half joked online that Snyder could be going to jail. Like, I don't know, Al Capone was sent to jail for tax evasion at one point in
Yeah.
time. Like, that's what's being alleged here, that the books were cooked, and that certain things were underreported, with respect to NFL revenue sharing, and that the consumers were, taking, we'll say, I guess it's like robbed of, they made it very difficult to get these deposits out. So some pretty serious stuff. And then at the end of the day, Doug's like, who's at the top of the chain? Who's profiting based off of how well the organization is doing? The owner of that team. So yeah, if the federal government's, it's the attorney general's office. I don't want to say the federal government at this point, but if the AG's office is doing their job, they're going to, leave no stone unturned, right? Take boxes now, ask questions later, and try to figure this out. But there's been some pretty credible testimony from people within the organization that the commanders had two separate books. They had a fancy term they used, juice, like how much money they could skim off the top of various accounts in a kind of facetious manner. And that's, people are kind of saying that outwardly to Congress. Of course, they're going to investigate it. So in terms of like documentary evidence, at a certain point, like there's the allegation is that Washington was underreporting revenue to the NFL. And so the NFL, right, as an entity, I'm sure, they're paying their taxes, they're doing everything above board. So, if it's an IRS-based investigation, they're going to get books from the NFL, they're going to get books from Washington, see what matches up. And then maybe you go to the next level and you figure out the private earnings of a guy like Dan Snyder and see if those match up. So, yeah, at this point, they've just opened up an investigation. There's no, we don't have any word about whether they're following through with it or how close they are to charges, or anything like that. But the fact that they're looking into it, in light of 3 state attorney generals having openly announced back in April that they have opened their own investigations, I think that's certainly something.
Yeah, maybe, who knows? Maybe there are just a few Washington football fans in the government that say, hey, maybe this will help push him out.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talk about like Congress, about how maybe this was politically motivated from the left versus the right. But now you're at the attorney general level. Like, that's not really at this point a political move, right? You can't say it's a Democratic thing, it's a Republican thing. Just attorney general's office is open to file. It could be pretty bad. So yeah, going back to where we started the conversation, right? Like, why is Dan Snyder announcing that he's considering maybe possibly selling the team? And it was his press release that people were looking at.
Yeah.
I think it's to get ahead of it. Dan Snyder is an optics guy. He wants to make it seem like he was leaving on his own terms. And the fact that he, his report went out before the AG's report went out, maybe that's in Dan's sick mind. Maybe he thinks that's a win for himself, that he beat, the reporting in that sense.
Yeah. So we don't know what's going to happen. It's just an open investigation, but it's just another notch on the belt. I said it last time. Snyder has made we can say the ultimate mistake. He, not for robbing someone, but for robbing someone richer than him. You don't steal from rich people. Everyone knows that. That's where you go wrong. So he stole from the NFL, allegedly, possibly with these books. The only thing bigger than the NFL, U.S. government. You can't steal from the government. So if it's a tax issue, that strikes 2 and 3 right there.
Yeah, and I think, one other level to it, like in addition to stealing from the government, he was pretending that in 2022, he was unable to sit for like a Zoom deposition in front of Congress, and he made them jump through hoops. There's people tracking where Dan Snyder's yacht was. He was pretending he was in 100 different countries at the same time. So yeah, he made Congress chase him, right? Roger Goodell was able to find some time in his busy schedule to provide testimony to Congress on that day. Snyder took another couple weeks, months to get it done, and he made Congress kind of jump through a bunch of hoops. So we know that these investigations were, from the state attorney general, from the federal level, they were started by the, congressional investigation. So, don't make Congress look bad. I think, I don't know, again, I'm not a political guy by any means, but it's tough to miss that in all of this, that these investigations were started from Congress, and Snyder didn't do any favors by, fighting them in terms of appearing. Like, if you have nothing to hide, why not come out and speak? So, Dan's invasiveness, I certainly think raised some alarms to people.
Yeah, and like you said, Roger Goodell showed up. He lied during that testimony, so he should probably be held for perjury for that. But even then, he at least showed up. So I can definitely see that being an issue as well. So what are these next steps? It's basically an open investigation now. If he sells the team, he's still going to have issues, with, or possibly with, the investigation. where do we go from here? What's the next thing that's going to happen?
Man, there's a lot. So I guess we'll put them in a couple buckets, right? Well, first, we're going to figure out if the Attorney General's office is actually going to file some type of formal charges, and we'll figure out if it's, the IRS or the SEC or where that might go. I think that's the federal bucket. Then you have the state bucket, right? That's the DMV area. All three of their state attorney generals have announced their own investigations. So that was about 6 months ago. And sometimes it takes more than that to actually come forward and see if there's enough evidence. So you're looking at potential state charges that could independently flow. And then really, I guess bucket number 3 is if the NFL just says, you know what, we're not waiting for Dan to voluntarily sell. We're going to force him out, and we're going to dictate the terms of who gets this team and how much it's sold for and the time frame under which the team is actually sold. So that's I'd imagine would be a very contested hearing between Snyder and the other owners, potentially kicking one of their own out of the league. And then last, Uggs, is like, if Snyder just says, you know what, like the same conversation you and I had last time, it's like at the end of the day, Dan Snyder, if and when he sells 100% of the team, in theory, the team is worth close to $6 billion. Why would any individual want to put up with all of this? Why would they want to be under the microscope instead of just like throwing in the the white towel and just saying, you know what, I'll take my $6 billion and I'll go home. That remains unclear to, I think, anyone, unless your last name is Snyder, why he would continue to fight that. So if one day Dan wakes up and says, you know what, I'm ready to go, I'm good to go, let me cash out $6 billion. Yes, we would still follow these stories in terms of the investigation, but it wouldn't be as much of a news story as it is while you still have an active owner potentially under federal investigation. So those are your 4 buckets: the federal investigation, state investigation, whether the NFL forces Snyder to sell, or, if Dan Snyder just says, you know what, I'm out 100%, see you later.
Yeah. And that's at the end of the day, it's, how much time do you really want to spend on this, Dan Snyder? You can get $6 billion, go live on your yacht and wherever you want to live. And that's that. Well, I'm sure that would be the easy case, for everyone, for all the Washington football team fans. So yeah, I guess we'll see.
Doug's, they need to give you a big gavel for this this Judge Doug section. They need to give you like a massive gavel, get the like wig, get the robe, get everything.
I have a robe and I have a gavel.
Man.
Long story, but I was pre-law, so I got really into being pre-law when I was at FSU. But who knows? Maybe I'll get a nice green screen. Maybe I'll do like a Barstool official seal of Barstool. Who knows? A lot of options.
I like it.
Dan, I really appreciate it. Again, Dan Lust, and your podcast is Conduct Detrimental.
Conduct detrimental, yes, very apropos for these conversations, because that is the standard by which Dan Snyder may or may not get kicked out of the league, whether he is committed conduct detrimental to the interests of the league, which I certainly think we're there. It's just a matter of whether the owners want to pull that trigger.
Absolutely. Well, I'll keep you in the loop as far as PFT's, how he's feeling. I'm telling you, he was glowing yesterday. And that was before the news that the investigation opened. So I'll keep track of him and let you know how he's doing. But yeah, it seems to be good news for everyone in Washington.
Well, next time you get me on, you could be Judge Doug's, you could prosecutor PFT. I'm not that I'm defending Snyder, but if you need someone to play that role,
absolutely.
I guess I'm happy to, but I'm not thrilled with that. But I think that would be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Well, we really appreciate it, Dan. Thanks, and see you next time.